I wrote a script and then said, I don't care what you say. You don't even have to say this, but let's just improvise it. And we do like a really long scene where they'd just be improvising, but I'd film the improv and they could say whatever they want. And then I watch it that night and then I rewrite the script based on their improvisation so that the script only has things they've actually said just come out of their mouth.
Trata de mantener siempre firme los hombros. Y recordate que si fallas, seguís adelante hasta que le pegues.
Y recordate que para el primer tiro, siempre apuntas abajo. Le puedes apuntar ya sea al estómago o a la verga.
Nada de apuntar hacia arriba, siempre apuntar hacia abajo porque la pistola en cada disparo se te va a ir levantando.
Y cuando ya esté abajo, le tenés que dar a la cabeza. Pero rápido.
¡Para, Lu!
Víctor va a ir con vos, pero parezcan novios, muchachos. Ponete esto,
¿De quién es esto?
no importa.
Víctor no puede ir armado. En todo caso, vos tendrías que darte el cuento.
Va.
Andalú. Todavía te puedes arrepentir.
Mira, mi papá, Oliveiros, y este barbero merecen morir, son los hijos de puta. Vamos ya.
It's been a long run through different countries, but Cadejo Blanco comes out in the US theatrically for the first time this April. So about a month from now on the 21st, which is a Friday. And that will be at the Leammle cinemas. It's going to start at the NoHo 7 in North Hollywood. And the screenings go from that Friday night all the way through till the next week. And if we do well, it'll play another week, but there's never any guarantee about that. So if people want to see it, we would encourage you to come on that opening weekend, that first Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the 21st, 22nd, and the 23rd. The cool thing is that I will be there for all the evening shows and a couple of the afternoon to do a Q&A and intro. I'll be with some of the cast and crew, and there will be 2 or 3 special guests, kind of very big celebrity guests doing the Q&As of each of the shows. Very big, either filmmakers, actors, or writers or music personalities that are kind of household names have in the Latin American community have agreed to come do the Q&As for the opening weekend screenings, because this film tends to have a lot of questions afterwards on how it got made and how it was pulled off, and a lot of the subject matter that it tackles is very big. So we're really excited about the big Guatemalan and Latin American community here in LA that'll get to see it on a big screen, because we've premiered in Guatemala, Mexico, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Spain, France later this summer. But the US premiere, it's really cool to start it out in LA with such a big Latin American population.
Yeah. Well, everyone in ScreenCraft, go to this premiere. I'm going to be there. I didn't realize, like, if you're doing a Q&A and all this stuff, I'm going to be there. I live in LA, so I'll show up to it. And everyone, go see this movie. Especially now, you got me excited about who these celebrities might be. I have a few ideas, like, in the Latin community.
I can't disclose yet, because they're not, like, they're all 99% confirmed, and we want to, like, but let's just say it'll be worth the price of admission. There are going to be some big people, a few outside of the Latin American community too, who are just known filmmakers here in LA that want to support the film and get their fan base out to see the movie. We do that for each other, filmmakers, to help drive out people to the theater.
Awesome. Well, the surprise is better anyway. Like, now we're all anticipating. So that's perfect. So, okay. So maybe we can start with, it's a kind of a funny question that you kind of mentioned earlier, but I think it is relevant. It is a good question, and we can go from there. But how did a white dude from the outskirts of Boston make a movie that gets so deep into this culture and this gang community? Like, how did you come up with this idea? How did it get started? The process of writing it? Like, you can just start delving into this in much detail as you want. I'm just so excited to hear more.
Yes, it's a great question how I came to be this guy in Guatemala from the US, this gringo who's down there making movies. So it all started in 2015 when I was asked to go down there to Guatemala City, actually, not the place we shot most of the movie, to consult on building a film school in a university down there in the city center called Francisco Marroquin University. It's one of the bigger universities in Guatemala City, and they had enough money to start a film program, and they invited a group of filmmakers, lawyers, philosophers, producers, and even some actors, and even some and a lot of academics, and a lot of academic people to help do a think tank for like a week and come up with an idea and a curriculum. And I helped author the curriculum of this theoretical film school that might exist in the next year.
Nice.
Fast forward a year, they built the school, they got the funding, they made the film school, they invited me to be the first professor of the film school.
Wow.
I don't know why I was asked. I think maybe it was a scheduling thing, or because I had a lot of experience teaching film since I graduated from film school and had started doing features. And through my first few years teaching there, I became very close with the first group of students that came in. They were the inaugural class. I was the inaugural professor. We were all just figuring it out. Guatemala doesn't have a very structured film industry. It's all very disparate. It's kind of like the Wild West in a lot of ways. And it's a much developing art there. Even though there are a lot of great artists there, there's not a real industry to speak of. There's a lot of interesting filmmakers making things kind of on their own.
Gotcha.
So we were all figuring it out all at once, and I was teaching them the way I would teach, a class here in the US, but kind of giving more of a broad idea of international cinema. And I became close with a student who is from this small town on the northeastern coast, Caribbean coast of Guatemala. And he was really interested in taking me to his town just to see another part outside of the city. All the most beautiful parts of Guatemala are outside of the capital. The capital is very industrial. You're very close to these gorgeous, like almost like just Edens of little towns like Antigua and Lake Atitlan. And so I went to the Caribbean coast with him for the weekend just to see. I didn't have an idea of how I wanted to make a movie yet, but he's just like, if you ever want to shoot something, there's beautiful forest, there's beautiful jungle, there's beautiful beach, there's beautiful city, there's unbelievable terrain up here that you can't get anywhere else. And nobody here there's never been a feature film shot in this town.
Wow.
And just that region of Guatemala is so beautiful. It's right on a river that goes out to the Atlantic Ocean. It's got a Caribbean climate, so it's always kind of nice and kind of rainy. And over the course of my first weekend hanging out there, I started going out with a lot of my students' friends, and some of them I found out later were parts of these small kind of disorganized crime units called clicas. They're kind of like gangs, very, very small and local. They're not like organized the way a narco trafficker would in Mexico, funnel drugs. It was all like local crime, just kind of family units that in place of a family, when people didn't have one, or some didn't go to school, or some just needed extra money, these groups of young people that would commit robberies and sell drugs and maybe even just do little small crimes in order to like pool together their resources and make money. And also a lot of part of it was protection and being able to feel like you were safe from other people by being in one. Okay. And I didn't really know it at the time, but I was more and more just hanging out with people in the street and friends of my student. And my student is not part of this world, but it's a small town. So you meet enough people and you run into them. But the thing that struck me about it is two things. One, women can be part of them, and not just in like the way that you see it glorified in these kind of cliched gang movies where they're prostitutes and that's it. Like, the women in this town that were part of these clicas or these gangs, they were high-ranking members that could do anything that men could do and also go to the very, very top. Now, of course, there's everything, but it was unique in that way. And I started asking questions, and my friends like, don't ask too much. Some people are really sensitive about it. But eventually I started meeting people just through like going out to like a soccer game or going out with friends to a party at a nightclub or something. I started realizing that there were people that were open to talking to me about it. And it just came from that curiosity that I didn't know that a year and a half, 2 years later, I'd be there preparing a movie. But what happened was over the course of the next few weekends, I would go back and keep meeting up with kids and people in town, some older who had left the gangs. And they started, some of them let me write down what they said. Some of them were open, as long as I didn't use their name, to like recording interviews on my phone. Nobody I know to this point wanted to be on camera, but this was still very early. But like little by little, I started collecting all of these stories, and a lot about women who had to join the gangs in order to like feed their little brother or be safe from some guy who was bothering them or whatever. All these stories, I started keeping logs and journals. And then by the end of like a year of doing this, I went back to Los Angeles because I'm not teaching there year round. I'm teaching in Guatemala City and I presented it to a friend of mine who is a producer here in LA. And I said, I have this opportunity and access to this very, very specific part of the world that's never been put on film. And I have access to the real people. Wow. And they've been opening up stories. He's like, all right, I'm going to give you a little bit of money, go down there and try to start casting and just see what you get. See if it's even feasible, because I know you have like the outline of a story yet just from these things, but I had to fictionalize it. And that was part of it, is that I started on the second year being down there to tell them I'm thinking about making a movie, but don't worry, it will be fictional. If I use anything of yours, it will be based on what you tell me. It won't be real. And people were much more open to telling me really intense things because of that. So I started putting together the skeleton of a story and then doing street casting with my student from UFM, who is from the town. His name is Pedro Murcia. He's now going to UCLA as a film student, even though he was in my film school that I taught at in Guatemala. So his father is a criminal justice attorney in the town, and his specialty is working with young kids who have problems with the law and helping them get out of jail and get a good job and stay out of like the dangerous world of crime. So he had access to all these kids who had previous affiliations in this world of crime and gangs, but like wanted a way out. So a lot of them were open to talking to me, and some of them, not all of them, some of them were very shy and didn't want to talk on camera, but a lot of them were open to like, not casting in a way, doing casting, but like going on camera and just talking to me about stories of their life on film. So what I was secretly doing was I was seeing if any of them were comfortable enough with themselves on camera to be like charming and interesting. And what I was really doing was I was secretly casting.
Do you mind if I ask you, like, I have a couple questions really quick. When did the actual idea come into your mind that this can be a movie? Because you said you were you were asking questions for a year. Did you start asking questions thinking in the back of your mind it could be a movie, or did that come in like much later?
The first day I was there, I was like, I think I can make a movie here. I just need to find the right story. And then it was a question of, the excitement was nobody's ever made a feature film here. And I always think when I start writing something or wanting to make something, because I only write stuff typically to direct myself. I've optioned scripts I've written to other people over the years, but they always start with something that I would want to make if I got the chance. So I was thinking, when I always think I'm starting to make something and write something to make, I think, what can I offer that no one else can, right? What do I have? I was like, I have access to this small slice of the world of these strange little cliques, these gangs, where women can be part of it, young kids can be part of it, and learning the inner. It weirdly function a lot like the Italian mob, but that's the way they they take money from all the businesses for protection, and there's all this racketeering, and but in general, I'd never seen it in this way, in this kind of socioeconomic background in this part of the world, with women kind of at the center of these gangs. Like the scariest people I met were women in these gangs. Some of them, a couple ended up in the movie. A couple were more reticent about being on film, even though it was fictional. Everything was fictional. But anyway, yeah, as soon as I got there and started meeting these people, I was like, there's a possibility. So I wasn't really even consciously admitting it to myself at that point yet, but I knew a lot of my curiosity is from being a curious person, but a lot of it is I'm always thinking of like, if something proves to me that I can't stop thinking about it, then I need to start writing about it. So
yeah, I don't want to interrupt you again.
no, please.
Why not do a documentary? Like, what was it that, why make it into a feature film rather? I mean, it looks like there's a lot of real elements in this and real people, so it kind of has elements of that, but why not do a full-blown documentary about this place? Why do a feature? Like, I'm always just curious about that.
There's two really simple reasons. One, I'm not a documentarian, and two, none of the people I spoke to would have talked to me if I told them I was giving a documentary. They would have literally shut the door in my face and told me to go home, or worse. Because the reason I got them to open up and actually let me hear their stories is specifically because I was making a fictional movie.
Gotcha.
They were not exposed for letting me in on secrets of their gangs. Like, I walked around, granted, none of the people that took me through these dangerous areas are in the film, but it was a great research period. During my research period, I walked through real safe houses, like real places where the kids go with their boss, they hide all of their guns, I was extremely safe about it. I went in with people who knew them, and that would, you walk around there enough with people who are from the town and you meet the right people. But yeah, I walked through really private areas of where these cliques do their business. And obviously I didn't film anything. I didn't bring anything with me. I just got to walk through it. Sometimes in some neighborhoods we drove through just for safety. We just were like, let's just drive through, see it. It was all for my experience of understanding the town. But had I gone to anyone and said I'm making a documentary, I wouldn't have had any access. And weirdly and ironically, going in with the first thing I say, saying I'm making a fictional film, but I'm doing research on it, I want to know how it really is. I could get closer to the truth with the access that was granted to me than I would have ever had I gone in as a documentarian.
No, I think that's a really good insight. Like, it's an interesting thing that there is it's almost like there's a wall there that made them feel a little bit more safe and comfortable. But my opinion too is, like, narrative movies can be so much more impactful, you know what I mean, when you do it the right way. So I'm pumped that you did it as a feature. So anyway,
the goal, just to expand on that a second, the goal was to preserve the authenticity of it, like you would in a documentary, at every turn, even when making a fictional film. So especially because I'm not from this culture, right? Yeah. Even though I live in Guatemala part-time for my teaching at the film school, I knew that there was going to be a great responsibility in me to make sure this was representing their world correctly. So that's why every draft of the script was vetted by the people in it. They changed all of the dialogue. Very little of my dialogue even exists in the finished movie. The story I worked out with them and added my little pieces to make sure it was a 3-act, narrative with a beginning, middle, and end. But all the scenes are directly from things they told me. All the dialogue is from them. And I'd say 80% of the cast is being represented by people who are really from there. I said, if I'm going to make something like this about this town that's never been put on film before, in a feature, I'm going to allow them to be the ones representing themselves. Yeah. So while I am not from there, I'm just a storyteller. I felt like this is the first time I'd ever done a project where it was a living thing, because I always had to defer to the people inside the movie. Yeah. Whether it was the dialogue, whether it was the logistics of a scene, whether it was the way that they would look, they got to dress themselves. They got to do whatever they wanted. In that ways, we were taking a little bit off of the documentary, theme, things you'd find in a documentary where they come to the set dressed however they would normally dress. They get to change all of their dialogues at a moment's notice. Wow. We shot the film with long shots so that whatever they said in the scenes we could keep rather than have to match it. A a lot of documentary strategy went into this narrative movie and almost making it kind of a hybrid, even though
That's
it's
what I was gonna
fully
say.
fictional.
Yeah. It totally seems like it's a somewhat of a hybrid with you bringing the deep archetypes of like the storytelling elements to it, which is amazing. I also I'm so curious about this. I want you to get back to kind of the what you were talking about, the process of it, but just for like a couple minutes, I'd love to get your quick thoughts on like, how did you get like just the trust that these people had in you and the relationships that you must have built? Because it is such an important part of filmmaking and connecting and collaborating. Do you have any tips on how you got to these people to trust you and started building these relationships? Because I mean, it's an amazing thing that you were able to get into this tight-knit community that's never been put on the screen. So like your quick thoughts on like how you started building trust with these people. I'd love to hear a little bit about that too.
Mostly you're talking about the cast, right? The people who participated in front of the camera, because there's a whole period of getting people's trust behind the camera to just let me have access to research subjects and locations. And really, I mean, the head of that, the heart of all of my access was through my student, Pedro Murcia, who ended up being a co-producer on the film and just traveled the world with me as one of my best film students I've ever had. I'm very proud of him. He's 24 and has already co-produced a feature, but it took place in his town. His father was the lawyer that connected us with our first research subjects. And these are people who have either gotten out of jail or out of legal trouble recently and are trying to go more legit with their life and looking. So a lot of them were really interested in, obviously anonymously, talking to me about their time in the gangs and their experiences and the way it works. So I was able to build a real trust with them through my association with Pedro and his father. Pedro and his father are very well known and highly regarded in this town. Without that trust immediately, I'm the gringo that teaches Santos's son, Pedro, at the film school. But again, also I had like 2 feature films already made that people could like Google and see on YouTube, the trailers at least. And my second feature film had played in Latin America and got Latin American distribution. And even though it wasn't wildly successful in Guatemala, you could find it. You could look for it. I think that helped, but it did take a long time, even to gain not only to gain their trust and of their stories, but also just getting them to show up to rehearsals every week when I came down on the weekends, and then believing that it was actually a movie. I did a one day rehearsal once where we filmed. I brought my cinematographer. He was from Argentina. And we filmed them for a day in these improv exercises in one of the filming locations. And a lot of the kids thought that was the movie shoot. Wow. And they were texting me afterwards like, Justin, when's the movie coming out? That was so much fun. Wow. And it was like a 3-hour rehearsal. And they thought it was the movie because a lot of people, there's been no film crews on there. They don't know. How could you know, right? That wasn't the movie. We did say this is rehearsal. We're doing tests. We're workshopping a scene, and the scene kind of ended up in the movie in a different way. We rewrote it a lot, but it was just for me to kind of test how comfortable they were on camera. But there were actors that literally just didn't believe we were actually making a movie, and we had to they didn't show up, and we'd have to have our producer go drive to their house and be like, you have to come, and they're like, I gotta work. We're paying, because we paid everyone better than the going rate for what people were, or the going rate or better, so it wasn't like we had to beg everyone, but some people, it was about just them not being as not comfortable is the wrong word, probably just used to being in a film culture and film set. It doesn't happen there. I think there was only one other feature film to shoot in this little town ever, and it was one day. They shot in 1933 a scene from Tarzan, and they used the port. The city's on a really big port where it's the biggest exporter of bananas in the whole world comes out of this port. So there's all these boats coming in and out 24/7. the Dolan Chiquita banana port. Yeah. And so they used it in Tarzan to film a scene of them arriving in Africa, which of course Puerto Barrios is not Africa, but they
Movie magic.
used it for a scene. Yeah, black and white, 1933. You can see scenes from this little town, and one of the hotels we shot at is still there. Was there in 1930s, which is how
interesting place. Like, there's so many interesting things about this place. I've never heard of it, but there's it's just crazy how many places exist like this, where there's so much going on and so many interesting things, you know. So that's really cool. I just want to say too, really quick, like, it must have been an amazing education for you, like, going through this filmmaking process, which does not at all sound, I mean, every movie is different and unique, but this sounds like the amount of leadership that it must have took to make this thing happen. I can't even imagine. So kudos to you, like, pulling this thing off and making a good movie out of it. You know, like, it sounds like it must have just been a beautifully chaotic experience pulling this thing off.
It was chaotic, but shooting in Guatemala had its advantages and disadvantages. Like you said, not a lot of people are accustomed to making movies. They don't understand the idea of rehearsal and showing up on time to set and all that. But I had a really good time, and like, people were excited about a movie. Getting permits was no problem. There was no paperwork. There was, there's no like SAG, which was wonderful. It was really nice to just be able to have the majority of the time there to like work on creative stuff. Yeah. If we lost a location on the day of the shoot, which happened a couple times, we could easily during lunch scout around and find another one in town, and they were open to letting us shoot there. That's why the film kind of felt like alive. It felt like, even though things were falling apart in front of us, we could easily put them back together. And when something didn't work, you could just ask the people to do something else. And as long as we were all agreeing on the story. But I have to say, I couldn't have done it without such a good supportive Guatemalan team. You know, my cinematographer and I, and one of the producers on the set during the shoot, were not Guatemalan. Everyone else was Guatemalan. And the Guatemalan production company that I'm now part of and work with quite a bit, La Danta Films with Mauricio Escobar, and the Orange Company, which is run by an American and a Guatemalan, who were really helpful. And then our casting directors, our acting coach, all the crew, everybody, even a lot of my students at the university who wanted to crew on the movie did. You know, having a group behind me that was from the country and believed in what we were doing. It was the only way that I could have done it. And it was about putting together the right people that believed in the project and that understood that I wasn't here to tell my own version of any story down there, but I was literally just coming up with something that, based on the years of research, and then allowing the people there to tell it. And I'm just there to kind of move it left and right when I knew a story beat needed to come in, and you know, because it's an archetypal story. It's a girl goes undercover into a gang, joins a gang in order to find her missing sister. That's it. You know, we've seen that story of a girl someone going into deep cover in a crime world in order to bring someone down or do something. But like, her sister goes missing, which is something that I found happens a lot. Women go missing on these buses and while traveling through Guatemala. And I thought, this is something that happens and I see on the news every day when I'm in Guatemala. Why not make it the starting off point for a girl who then has to go join a gang to figure out what happened to her sister who went missing. So that was always there, and fictional, of course. The rest of it kind of came from the research and the work with the kids.
Gotcha. So since we kind of touched on it, we talked about this earlier. And we've already blown through like 40 minutes. This is going by, which is a good thing. No, it's good. It's awesome. Tell me a little bit about the casting, because it sounds like it just is such an interesting process, finding people that are real people and people willing to do. Like, tell me a little bit about the casting of this thing. Like, how did you go about getting people on board to act in this movie?
Well, there are two phases, right? So there's, the first 30% of the movie starts in capital in Guatemala City, and it follows a working class girl and her sister who go out one night partying against their grandmother's wishes. They stay out too late and they get in a fight. And one of the older sister leaves her at the bar. The next day, her sister doesn't come back. And so we had to do the whole intro part of Guatemala City there. So we did use some actors, especially the main girl who goes on the whole journey to find her sister. She was a girl that I had seen 6 years previously in a movie called The Golden Dream, which premiered at Cannes in 2013, and actually she won an acting award there. And her co-star her name is Karen Martinez, and then her co-star Brandon Lopez, who's also in that movie, actually won the co-acting award with her at Cannes as well. I brought them in and said, I'm gonna give you guys the roles. They came in. I met with Brandon, and Karen came in and read, and I was like, I need you to help me find the rest. So I'm gonna bring in actors and some people from your theater programs and people from the film school and people from off the street. And they helped me read with everybody I could find. And we found some really cool actors. There's not really that many like professional film actors in Guatemala, but the ones that we found roles for. Juan Pablo Oleslager is another one who's kind of famous in Guatemala as an actor and has won awards and played films at Berlin and Venice. He got to be one of the professional actors. But after that, like main 5 or 6 professional actors, we literally just looked for people who were real people. And it was about a combination of finding real people and basically having auditions and castings with the professional actors and trying to mix them together. The 2 professional actors, Karen and Brandon, the lead and one of the main kids in the gang, they started as non-professionals who were pulled off the street into a casting. So they had that experience. So they were able to share that with the cast of non-professionals that we got, and ended up, even though we had an acting coach for them, the main kid in the gang, like the main romantic lead who the main girl finds in the gang, who dated her younger sister, who she befriends and joins the gang. We pulled him off the street in Guatemala, in Puerto Barrios. He was working at an auto shop fixing motorcycles. Wow. And had a long checkered past of being not necessarily involved, but like adjacent, and knowing that world and knowing the gang life. And, it's hard when you're a kid in that town to not at least have seen some stuff, Sure. And so we moved him to Guatemala City because he just had the personality of someone who I knew could be the role. And this is after maybe auditioning 50 kids in Guatemala City who were not part of this town and this world that just couldn't do it. And we got him an acting coach, and he lived in Guatemala City with us, went through an intensive acting program. And he lived with us, and he helped us the whole way. He's the male lead in the film. He never acted before in his life.
Man, that's insane. That's insane.
Yeah, and then Brandon, who is the other professional who we brought on, he's the only professional actor in the gang of kids. He was the on-set acting coach for the kids. So like when we yelled cut, he'd have them doing exercises. I'd be working with the DP. So it was all very segmented and planned so that we could make sure that everyone was comfortable. So by the end of the movie, this collection of kids we found were actually like kind of a cool little family unit. And they were but it was very sad when we all left because we were all living together in a hotel in town. And some of them who were locals were allowed to like live outside of the hotel, but they'd always end up just coming to the hotel to hang out with the casting crew because we were such a family by the end. It was so much fun.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, changing people's lives, like these, like people pulling someone out of an auto body shop and then putting them in this movie. Like, are any of these people going to continue acting? Like, have you been keeping up with them? Like, they want to get into it more seriously and make that their careers? Like, is that part of it too?
Yeah, it's funny you ask. Rudy, the main kid, who was the kid we pulled out of the auto shop on his lunch break, he just got a second acting role in something. Oh, nice. I believe it's a short film, but hey, I mean, gotta go where the work is. And we received a couple grants from a foundation, an NGO that we partnered with in Guatemala that is geared towards helping the community and the kids that acted in the film find more opportunities, whether it's for film or wanting to go back to school. And a couple of them have expressed interest in continuing to study film. One of the actors wants to be an assistant director. He really likes like behind the camera crewing. A couple want to keep acting, and you know, because I still have a footprint there in Guatemala and a company that I do work with, I will be making sure that they are considered for anything that's casting in the next coming year or two. Because I will say, one of the best things I hear when the movie's over is they don't know who was professional and who was a first-time actor. And for me, it means two things. The professionals were able to really like disappear into their roles, but also the non-professionals, we were able to get comfortable enough to really feel like they were actors.
Yeah.
And for me, that's a huge achievement because I had no idea whether people were going to believe them. My whole work during on set during shooting was to try to make them comfortable enough to forget the camera was there. A lot of this was just wearing them out and doing lots of takes to the point where they just were annoyed with me that we're doing so much. And then at that point, they're so tired and bored of the scene that they forget, or mad at me that they forget the camera's there. And then they're just doing their thing. And there's some absolute magic that happened in a take here or there. And I think that's what the goal is to find that. And it takes a long time, but I didn't see any other way to make a movie like this other than go that long circuitous route of the 3 years of research, the interviews, the changing the script, the real people. You know, I wouldn't want to go the route where I just hire professional actors. I think this was the way to make this film. It's going to be the first movie ever shot in Puerto Barrios. I need the people from Puerto Barrios to be in it, like getting to tell their own stories, you know?
That's like part of the magic of this thing. And it is a huge compliment that even when I watched the trailer, I would have never guessed any of this and the amount of real people. Like I would have never guessed, like the trailer was, or it's like the teaser trailer where she's shooting at the dummy. That's the teaser that I saw. And it looked it's an awesome teaser that got me super sucked into it. But I would have guessed like just that there's people that were first time actors or anything, you know, so it's huge.
Are you talking about the scene where she's doing target practice and she's they're trying to teach her how to shoot a gun and like, it like be sure it doesn't jump and hit you and hurt your, so that's a funny scene because there's not a script for that scene. I literally just told the two kids who were teaching her how to shoot, like, teach her how to shoot. Like, what would you say? Wow. And the guy's like, I know what to say. and then the girl who's with them is like, I'll just reiterate whatever he misses. And these two and because it was all one take, you know, like a long shot where we're on them, I feel like I have like 12 of them and they're all a little different and they all are really authentic. And that was the goal, was just like when you're designing a movie, you have to over plan so that anything can happen during. You know, it's not like you don't plan and then just magic happens. The chaos has to be organized in a way so that the shot list shows that we're going to have enough time to do 12 of these and there's not going to be a script. And the kids are just going to talk and teach this girl who's an actress who's going to just go with whatever they say. Like, hey, make sure you keep your shoulder straight because it's going to kick. And then, you know, aim lower than you normally would, because if you aim high, you're going to kick and it go up and you'll miss him. Make sure you, and like, these are things I didn't know. I've never shot a gun in my life. I've never owned it. Like, so if I have a scene like that, I have to defer to the kids in the movie who have shot guns, you know?
I would have never guessed that though, because there's like a really funny, good line of dialogue in there where the girl says like, you know, I forget what she says exactly, but it sounds like scripted. Not that it sounds like it's acted, but it's like witty, clever dialogue that you would.
Oh, yeah. You know, what's funny? I heard that in a rehearsal. So what I do is, this is like the method that I kind of discovered while making this, is that non-professional actors aren't great at improv, but if you do enough of it, they say enough interesting things that you can put them together. So what I did was I wrote a script and then said, I don't care what you say. You don't even have to say this, but let's just improvise it. And we do like a really long scene where they'd just be improvising, but I'd film the improv and they could say whatever they want. And then I watch it that night and then I rewrite the script based on their improvisation so that the script only has things they've actually said that has come out of their mouth. So that the next day when they get to set and they see all the new lines, they're like, oh, I said all these things yesterday. I go, yeah, I didn't write it. You said these. I'm using what you said. And what that does is it allows them to be more natural because they're only using lines that they already know. They're not learning. They're like, oh, yeah, this is how I talk. So then also they're changing that too. I go, oh, and you don't even need to say this. Now, 9 times out of 10, they say something like it. Yeah. But they never say it 100% like it. But what that does is it allows them, one, to improvise without it being like super long and they don't know what they're doing. But also it allows them to feel comfortable because it's stuff that they've already said. It's a little secret that I kind of started using over and over and over. But I think the line you're talking about is the girl's trying to explain to aim low, and she says, make sure you only aim at his stomach or his dick or something like that. Yeah, that was not me. Like, they were saying that in the improv, and I thought it was so funny that that's what this girl was saying for him to do. I was like, oh, that's going in the script. Like, well, it's also like that was it was such a good teaser. Like, it was the way the whole thing put together was such a good teaser that gives you like just enough interest. Like, you're like, what is going on? Like, what is this about? Like, what is this relationship here? Obviously this girl is like an outsider with the way that they're all like kind of connected with each other. So that's so cool. While we're on this topic, because now we don't have so much more time, but sure, because ScreenCraft is a screenwriting company, I would love to get just like a quick kind of any thoughts on like, what was your approach? I mean, you've been kind of going into it a little bit, but what was the approach with from idea to getting it on paper? And then obviously you're talking about it changed so much, but did you ever write one full draft of this thing, or was it just kind of a puzzle piece that you put together the whole time you were shooting? Like, what was the screenwriting process? Oh, I wrote a full script. So it started though with an outline. It started with like, I want to tell a story and these are the scenes. And then I went to Guatemala and it changed every time I would go to this town. I was already in Guatemala for most of it. I was in the capital, but I went to Puerto Barrios, which by car is 4 to 7 hours, because of the roads. So it's a nice long weekend trip. So I went from the outline to like an English language version of the script that still had the story, but I was still using my own dialogue. But I was incorporating things that my research subjects had told me about living in a gang, about living in Puerto Barrios, about the relationship between the police and just what a girl has to do to stay alive in one of these gangs, what a guy has to do, everything like that. And then also just how the way the different neighborhoods have their own ones, just all the politics involved with all of this. It's such a microcosm of the bigger gang world and like bigger communities. And then once I got all that right, I brought it to my assistant who I hired on the movie, another former student of mine, who's really great with English and Spanish and languages in general. And we did it into like Castellano, which is basically normal Spanish you'd be in you'd like learn in a high school, right? Okay. So not Guatemalan Spanish, right? So then my producer Mauricio Escobar, who is from Guatemala, is like, well, this is like the kind of Spanish you would speak if you were in like a sophomore in college intro Spanish class. We're not going to do this. We're going to do Guatemalan Spanish. So we had to change it from that to Guatemalan Spanish, which has much different verbs and slang and ways that people talk than even Mexico, which is its neighbor and where I learned a lot of my Spanish. So we had to do that. And then from there, Pedro, co-producer who's from the town, found all the slang. We changed all the slang for all of that. And then, of course, through rehearsals and through casting it, they were all rewriting their dialogue constantly. So the story was written first in English in an outline without dialogue. Gotcha. And then through there, it was made into a script in English, script in Castellano Spanish, script in Guatemalan Spanish, and then script in Guatemalan Spanish with Puerto Barrios slang. And then they improv whatever they kind of wanted to say for most of it.
Oh, cool. So yeah, like I always like to get that take on outlining is such an important part of the process too with screenwriting, and starting with an outline. Is there going to be a screenplay available online? Like, I'd be so interested to read this thing. Like, I would be so curious just to like take a look at what the final, final draft kind of looked like by the end of it. I'm always so curious to that. But
I don't have one, but I do have the version of the script we shot in Spanish with all of the barrio slang. I will say though that I'd say half of it reflects what's in the script and half of it is close, but they improvised a lot. So, I mean, it's interesting you ask. I think it would be fun to like look at the script that we went into the shoot with, and maybe like a literal translation of everything in the movie. It might be an interesting exercise, but no, nothing exists like that right now that I don't have one. No.
Yeah, that would be really cool. So really quickly too, we didn't even get to this, which is totally fine because this has been like a really fun conversation. Now I'm just pumped up about seeing this movie. Like, I'm super excited. Just the amount that went into making this thing happen and knowing all these details about all the people in it and stuff like that. I'm super pumped. So hopefully everyone watching this, and when we post this stuff on social, like hopefully y'all go see this movie and think about everything that went into making this. And it sounds really interesting, but I do want to hear, I'm kind of just curious about how, like in the early stages or with the ScreenCraft grant, how did the ScreenCraft grant help out? Like, what was the process? Why did you choose ScreenCraft out of all these programs and stuff out there? Like, what was that process like in the early stages? And how did you even hear about ScreenCraft to submit to us? I always like to get just a little take on that,
Sure. Yeah. I think what happened was I was looking into different film grants of a friend had recommended me this one, and I did a little looking into it, and I thought what they were looking for was something that we had. I think they were looking for something that was more in this genre of like thriller and crime and drama that had some talent attached, some money attached. And while we had like the majority of our financing already attached when I applied, we didn't have all of it yet. But we also had some exciting actors. They were Latin American actors. We had a cool production company in the US and one in Guatemala. And so I thought, because even though it wasn't like going to change the budget exponentially with these small films, you always end up a little bit short in post. Yeah. And I knew that if we got a little bit of a kick for like an extra song or two, or a couple more days of the sound mix, or to be able to afford a couple more days of ADR, it would always help. And so that's kind of the way that we use the money, is awesome. We used it to really expand our post, our music, and just have a little bit of a pad, which actually ended up really providing itself valuable. And we did the sound mix in LA with a Mexican-American sound designer who's done like Hell or High Water and all of Alexander Payne's movies. Really great. He's bilingual also, so he could speak to our sound people in Guatemala. By the time we were in color in Guadalajara, Mexico, we were still using pieces of the ScreenCraft grant for little things through color, post, and sound. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to hear it helped. If it helped at all, super glad to hear it helped. You know how, like indie filmmaking, there's always little things that come up and little puzzle pieces that come up. So I'm glad to hear that it really helped. And for everyone watching, go see this movie. And also, I'm super excited about who are these mystery people now. Like, I've been thinking about
we're going to do the Q&As?
Yeah, like the Q&As, like I'm just interested in this. Like there's people, and I'm not going to say anything, but I'm like, there's a couple of like actors that I could see that probably would love this movie and get behind it. I don't even want to say, but there's like a couple of people that come to mind, but I can't wait to go and like check this out and see who's going to be there
we'll announce it on our social media who's going to be doing the Q&As like the week of. Okay, cool. The Instagram is Cadejo Film, so Cadejo film.
We'll share share all the socials and the notes and like everything there. And then one last time, do you mind going over the details one more time of where this is going to be? And for the Q&As, is it only one particular theater that you're going to be at, or are you going to be going to different theaters to do the Q&A?
Well, luckily or unluckily, I don't know, we're only starting our first week in one theater.
Okay.
We're only going to be at the Leammle NoHo in North Hollywood.
Gotcha.
That'll be Friday, April 21st. I think there will be shows all day, but the evening show, and the show after the evening show, whatever that next one is, the late show, I'll do a Q&A. We'll have a VIP moderator for that first night, and then the Saturday and Sunday shows, starting in the probably midday until the evening, I'll be at all of those, and each one will be moderated by somebody, TBD. And I'll be there with members of the cast and crew, a couple of the producers, and a couple of the cast members. Yeah, we'll be there, and to most of the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday shows, starting on April 21st, on Friday, April 21st. And the hope is that if we do enough sales in that week, we do think that we will stay on for a second week, either at that theater or at another Leammle theater somewhere in LA. But you would just have to stay looking at our Instagram account to know all of that.
Right, cool. Well,
yes.
We'll put the socials in the Instagram. We'll share it all over the place. We'll get the word out. And thank you so much for talking about this. This is really fun, and I'm super excited to see this. And just, there's so much that I got out of this, listening to the amount of just work that you put into this and problem solving that must have happened in leadership and everything. So really appreciate talking to you, man. This was awesome.
No, thank you. I will say that the movie's really was shot and constructed to be seen on a big screen with good sound. So if you can see it on a big screen, that would be great. And if you do, stay for the Q&A, because if you stay through the credits, there's something actually that happens in the credits that's well worth staying for that you'd miss if you left. So kind of like a little Easter egg there too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.